One of the best decisions that Penn State made for this season continues to pay off.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. I'd really appreciate it if you left a like on this episode, but more importantly, be a part of the discussion. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Biggest takeaways from Washington. Biggest takeaway here, and this was something you just had to be patient with, was Abdul Carter moving from linebacker to defensive end. Penn State's decision is paying off, and it's only going to get better. Abdul Carter even said it himself after the game that he is only going to get better down the stretch. But I do have some other concerns about the defensive line, but we'll talk about the bright spots, particularly with Penn State's defense and how they're going to handle the Nicholas Singleton situation if he is going to miss time, what they need to do there. It was one of the smartest moves to move Abdul Carter from linebacker to defensive end. Abdul Carter has officially emerged as one of the best defensive ends in college football, because overall over the course of the season, those first few games against West Virginia, he had some production against Bowling Green, but West Virginia, even Kent State, UCLA, not getting it done, and it looked pretty bad at first, but those were the growing pains, if you will. Abdul Carter's changing a different position. Well, Zach, it's linebacker, defensive end. He was rushing after the passer a lot for his first two seasons. It shouldn't be that much of a transition. It shouldn't be that big of a change for him. But it is. There's the subtle nuances about playing linebacker, which he played all of his high school career, and then the first two seasons of his college career, and then now just saying, we're going to scrap all of that and move you to defensive end full time. Yes, they're doing some hybrid things, but moving him to defensive end for 95% of the time almost. All everyone had to do was be patient. Penn State, the fans, spectators, reporters, and that's what we talked about on the show. Not selling out on the fact that Abdul Carter, hey, he struggled early in the season with this change. You need to give up on it, scrap the plan, move him back to linebacker. And we said on the show, just wait. Just be patient for it. This was a big change going from linebacker to defensive end, but now it is paying off. Let's look at the last two games and against more difficult opponents. An elite Ohio State team, and I know Penn State blew out Washington, but that's not a bad Washington team. 10 tackles, 4 sacks, and a forced fumble. Then, since the Illinois game, 28 tackles, 7 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, all while getting some pass deflections in between. Let's point out the fact that Penn State does not blitz very often. Not as much especially compared to Manny Diaz defense, but Tom Allen does not blitz very often. He will just rush Abdul Carter and those first 4 defensive linemen, and they still get pretty decent pressure, especially Abdul Carter as of late. Let's also point out the fact that Abdul Carter is being held a lot. And it's not getting called, or he's being double teamed, or he's being schemed away from. Opposing offensive coordinators are making it their mission to avoid Abdul, and he is still producing. So that tells me even more about Carter's situation, is that he had a slow start. Pro Football Focus currently has him as a top 10 edge defender, but that's when you factor in the entirety of the season. If you take away those first 3 games, it is difficult to argue against that Abdul Carter is currently the best edge defender in the entirety of college football. Offensive coordinators are doing everything in their power, and they still can't stop him. And at the same time, Penn State is not sending extra pressure, blitzing. This is Abdul Carter and those first 4 defensive linemen, and Penn State's just getting organic pressure, is my point. Abdul's a pure football player. This is not surprising in the slightest, because he's just good at football. I'm not saying that you could put him at cornerback and this would work, But being in the front seven, he can play linebacker, he can play defensive end, you can stand him up, you can have him as a QB spy. He's a versatile player that's just able to adapt to any situation. So Abdul Carter's one piece of the puzzle. How about Deion Barnes? Deion Barnes working with him. This is a testament to his coaching. Remember, he is still relatively a young, new coach. Penn State makes the promotion and makes Deion Barnes the full-time defensive line coach. And Abdul Carter has responded accordingly to what Deion Barnes is teaching him. And not only that, this is really the first time for them closely working together, whether Barnes was as an assistant or just Carter being with the linebackers. So this is really the first full time that Barnes and Carter have had time together to fine-tune these things. And look what it's turned into in how many months' time? I mean, I think this has been a 5-6 month plan as we enter into November. The development's paying off. And then Tom Allen. Tom Allen being able to scheme him in a variety of ways, to use him in other pass rushing situations, but just giving him opportunities to be able to win in even through the double teams, even when offensive coordinators are trying to do their best to make sure that Abdul Carter doesn't get home. Tom Allen is still doing things defensively that help use Abdul Carter at his best to make him a disruptive force on defense, and so that it's hard for offensive coordinators. So Abdul Carter being the football player that he is, Deion Barnes coaching him up, and then Tom Allen putting the blueprint together to make sure that he gets the best out of Abdul Carter on a Saturday. Now, Abdul Carter is performing the best that we've seen all season, and it's only going to get better, if you can believe that. It's only going to get better. But I do have some concerns at defensive end. Abdul is playing out of his mind, but his fellow defensive ends are not. For the past couple of weeks here, Amin Vanover and Smith Velbert have been disappointing, to say the least. They've been non-existent. Ohio State and even against Washington, they did not have that big of an impact. And then Denai Dennis Sutton is hurt. So he's dealing with the groin injury. He's limited. He's available, but he's limited. So Denai Dennis Sutton is not the same. So those are those first four defensive ends that Penn State said, okay, we have tons of confidence in this group, but it's clearly not the same. So yes, Abdul Carter has taken a leap forward, but under the circumstances, those other three available defensive ends have taken a step back. And after that, there's really not a lot of depth behind them. Eager to see the continued development of Max Granville. I think Max Granville will be kind of that next defensive end in waiting. After Abdul Carter is going to be a first-round pick, so this is his final season at Penn State. Granville's developing well, but they plan on using his red shirt. They want to make sure that, and he's already played in 2 games, so he can play in 2 more out of these final 3. For the postseason, Granville might be important as a rotational player potentially, but those are really your only 5 realistic edge defenders to this point for Penn State. So they got to find a way to see if to complement Abdul Carter, see if you can get Denai Dennis Sutton as close to 100% as possible, and find a way to get Smith Velbert and Amin Vanover playing a little better. Defensive line as a whole, well, the defensive tackles are in a pretty good situation. And despite losing Hakeem Beamon in the middle of the season, there's still plenty to highlight on the defensive side of the football for Penn State, especially after this game against Washington. We'll tell you what to look forward to for this Penn State defense moving forward on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet just $5 and you will get $150 in bonus bets. If you win, the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it's all on the same page where you place your bets. It's that convenient. It's that simple. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today. And if we look over at FanDuel.com, we can see the lines for Penn State versus Purdue. They have been released. Penn State is a hefty favorite, minus 28.5 point spread, and minus 10,000 on the money line. If you're looking to bet Purdue, they are plus 2,400 on the money line. The total is set at 50.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them right now over at FanDuel.com. And remember, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The defensive line as a whole is still in really good shape. Love what I've seen out of Zane Durant the entirety of the season. His breakout, his emergence is truly what has helped put this defense and move them forward and kept them in that top 10 conversation, because Manny Diaz had this group playing at elite levels despite what the offense was doing. The Manny Diaz defense had them so firing on all cylinders, and Zane Durant emerging as that true disruptor alongside an Abdul Carter. But I don't think we should look past Devontae Thomas as he continues to be disruptive. He continues to perform well. And then Alonzo Ford being a rotational guy. Alonzo Ford, dude is athletic. He's agile. For someone who weighs 320 pounds, Alonzo Ford has come on strong, especially with that injury a season ago. Would have been a nice, helpful depth piece, but was not going to be an impact player. But then Alonzo Ford, as one of the second defensive tackles, has been that other player that, okay, Zane Durant and Devontae Thomas, one of them needs to come off the football field. Alonzo Ford goes in, and you really don't miss as much. Of course, that's why Durant and Jay Thomas are starters, but Alonzo Ford gives Penn State a lot off of the bench. Same with Keziah Izzard. Now, Izzard is a much-needed veteran presence here down the stretch, especially after Hakeem Beamon is absent from the team. No particular reason known at this point, just was not seen at practice, and then it was confirmed that he was off of the team at this point, so don't know the reason, and that's a strange one for me. I can't make any sense of it personally, because this was, a fifth, sixth-year senior player. He probably expected more playing time, and I can understand that because it was a big announcement when he returned for his final season of eligibility. But this is your final season. And next man up mentality, if, knock on wood, because I don't want to see anybody injured because of it, but Hakeem Beamon would have seen more playing time if any of those first four guys that I named happen to sustain an injury at any point in time. Unfortunately, they aren't, because defensive tackle is one of the deeper position groups on this team. So it stings from that sort of sense, but Penn State will be able to overcome it. Again, Zane Durant's breakout helps with that. Devontae Thomas, Keziah Izzard, Alonzo Ford, all being very experienced veterans, have played a ton of college football. I mean, between the three of those players themselves have played over 15 years of college football collectively together. The defensive line as a whole is in great standing, with Abdul Carter being one of the best in the country. Now, you do need to get denied Dennis Sutton healthy as soon as possible. See if you can develop Max Granville to potentially just be somebody that can come in and contribute in key spots, maybe pass rushing situations. And then Smith, Vilbert, and Amin Vanover, Penn State needs to expect more from them. Hopefully it's just a cold streak and they can figure it out and get back on track, because those are veteran players in their own right as well. Other parts of the defense, though, that Penn State seemingly just fly under the radar. Kobe King. Kobe King does not get a lot of praise. And we'll get to Jalen Reed and Zach Wheatley in a moment too, because I feel like these players, they're getting recognized when they only make big plays. But Kobe King is the glue that's holding the entire linebacker core together. He continues to string excellent games together for Penn State. Kobe King became that true Mike linebacker, where he's quarterbacking the defense, he's making the reads, making adjustments on the field, so Tom Allen will make the plays, and then Kobe King will get the call, and he's truly putting it all together on the football field when it comes to that part of the game. Aside from being the third leading tackler on the team, which is why I want to talk about Jalen Reed and Zach Wheatley here. But Kobe King is doing so much, whether it is stopping the run or playing in coverage, being an Iron Man, because depth is pretty limited at the linebacker spot, and he's just kind of picking up the slack for the rest of the group. Tony Rojas has not been good as of late, to say the least. Dom DeLuca, Tyler Elsdon, it's still kind of early for a Dakari Nelson who made the change from safety to linebacker, or I think about an Anthony Specca who's a true freshman, and you would like to see more out of those guys. Same with the Tamir Robinson. Those guys need time to develop. They're not going to be key contributors right away. They still need time. So Kobe King is the glue that's keeping all of the linebacker depth together here. And that's why I had him as one of the most valuable players on this defense. He had a slow start to the season, but I think now that he's settled in to being one of those veteran presences and including all the responsibility that he has as the true Mike linebacker in this 4-2-5 defense, Kobe King is one of those players that deserves a lot more recognition here. And same thing, only as he gets more comfortable, only going to get better down the stretch. So he hasn't made a position change like an Abdul Carter, but his responsibilities have changed. And Kobe King is now, you're seeing the progress actually unfold for King. And then Jalen Reed and Zach Wheatley. Jalen Reed, taken out of his key position, the Lion. That's where Penn State wanted to play him. KJ Winston injury changed everything, and Tom Allen had to adapt on the fly and take Reed out of a place where he was at his strongest. But Jalen Reed, same thing. Wisconsin game, 2 interceptions in the past 3 games. Didn't have the best game against Ohio State, I would say, but against Wisconsin and against Washington, putting together signature performances that put him in the conversation as not only one of the best safeties in the Big Ten, but in the country as well. And that's the same thing with Zach Wheatley. I mean, these two guys at the safety spot. These guys are your last line of defense, and they are leading the team in tackles. They're 1 and 2, and then Kobe King is third there. You would think Zach Wheatley would be the guy being one of the leaders in turnovers, and he's forced them, right? He's forced a good amount, but Jalen Reed also contributing as well. It's not just all one part of the safety spot. It's not just all Zach Wheatley, and it's not just all Jalen Reed. And this is what kind of stings. Penn State would have the best safety room, and it's hard to argue not that they don't with Jalen Reed and Zach Wheatley. It's really difficult as it is. They're still one of the best in the Big Ten and in the country. But if you had KJ Winston, Penn State would easily have the best safety room by far in the country with all 3 of them present. So the fact that Penn State has been able to adjust without KJ Winston and is getting top tier level ability from Jalen Reed, from Zach Wheatley is telling across the board. That's Terry Smith. That's Anthony Poindexter. That's, again, Tom Allen being able to maneuver the defense around to make sure that Jalen Reed is in a position to succeed. Same thing with Zach Wheatley. But then they have to go and do it. They have to go and execute. And they're the ones that perform at the top level with Tom Allen making those adjustments and scheming them up the right way. Now, we've been talking a lot of defense in this episode, but offensively, it's unclear if Nicholas Singleton's going to be available moving forward. Missed a good portion of the game against Washington. Had been dealing with bumps and bruises beforehand. What is Penn State's plan for Singleton? And what does the playoff outlook look like for the Nittany Lions? We'll talk about all of that to wrap up the show coming up next. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. You got to download the Gametime app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. That makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier than before. Gametime Picks, what does it do? It filters out all of the fluff to show you only incredible deals on incredible seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. And let's look at tickets for Penn State versus Purdue. You can either go on the Gametime app or go to gametime.co, and I have all the Gametime pick deals listed for me. There's a super deal right here, west side of the stadium, section 120, row 57, all in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout for $28 a piece. If you're looking for the lowest price on tickets for that game at Purdue, north side of the stadium, section 113, row 61, all in pricing, $12 per ticket. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So what does Penn State do at running back if Nicholas Singleton is not available for the remainder of the season? Now, this is not based on any information that I know. He's been dealing with bumps and bruises. He left the Washington game and was not available on the sideline. He was not available for the post-game press conferences as well. That is concerning, and it's concerning if he's not going to be able to go. Now, Penn State can still win without him. You have Katron Allen, and then the depth chart it's a delicate situation after Katron Allen. And why I say that is because, well, one, Cam Wallace is out indefinitely. So you had a good third option at running back, a really good third option at running back, and he's not available and most likely not going to be for the remainder of the season. Quentin Martin and Corey Smith had that incredible 70-plus yard run in that game against Washington. So it's good to see that, okay, Penn State isn't kidding when they say that we like Quentin Martin and Corey Smith, but they like them so much that they want to preserve their eligibility. Quentin Martin, I double-checked. It's not 2 games. He has appeared in 3 games. He appears in 2 more games. His red shirt's burned. If Penn State has to do that, if Singleton's unavailable, it's not ideal, but that's what they're going to have to work with. There's also Corey Smith. Corey Smith has only played in 1 game. So down the stretch, if your 1-2 punch is Katron Allen and Corey Smith for those final 3 games, Penn State can work with that. Penn State doesn't need Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen to beat Purdue, even Minnesota, and Maryland. They can win those 3 games still comfortably without Nicholas Singleton. Where you do need Singleton at his best, at his healthiest, is the first round of the college football playoff. You need him for that game. So if Penn State decides to be cautious, plan ahead, and have Singleton rest, I don't even know that I would still have him go just to kind of keep him up to game speed if he's available. If he's not 100%, essentially make Katron Allen the full-time workhorse the running back for them, and then have Nicholas Singleton kind of be that change of pace kind of guy, maybe get 10, 15 touches per game, but allow Katron Allen to take a primary amount of the snaps. If you need to plan long-term, because that's going to give Singleton the rest of November and a good chunk of December to get healthy, to get right, Penn State can be confident that they have Quentin Martin and Corey Smith. You got to be a little more careful with Martin's red shirt, but you can play Corey Smith as that second running back and not lose his eligibility. He has all 3 games available to him. So Penn State is playing this right in a sense. I'll even add this. Use Bo Pribula more. Run the Bo Pribula package a little more, and then he acts as a running back who can throw in this case. So you do have other options to get the ground game moving if Singleton is not a full go. Penn State is going to be smart about this. There's no need to risk Singleton's health any further if he is unavailable. We don't know what it is. We just know that beforehand he was dealing with bumps and bruises. Maybe he re-aggravated something against Washington. Hopefully that's not the case. So we won't know the severity of it until, the next time we get to talk to James Franklin, he's going to be asked about it. If it is a serious injury and he's able to return, I'd say protect him at all costs. Worry about the playoff game because you have Corey Smith and Quentin Martin for 1 more game before they lose. I mean, Corey Smith is good in terms of eligibility. He can play those 4 games, and he will be just fine. Martin can only appear in 1 more game. But you have Katron Allen to handle the workload. Just because they're co-starters doesn't mean that Katron Allen can't handle the full workload. Same thing with Singleton. If it was reversed and Singleton was the healthy back and Katron Allen was dealing with bumps and bruises, Singleton could handle 25, 30 carries a game and just have another rotation of backup running backs in there as well. But it is a big deal because he has distanced himself and turned himself into an elite running back. Singleton can do a lot of things, not only in the ground game, but as a pass catcher, as a blocker. He has become that all-around running back, especially with what NFL teams are looking for and the speed on top of that. He's technically the power back, weighing in at 226 pounds, and Katron Allen weighs 220. Singleton's got everything when it comes to his abilities as a running back. So he's extremely important for Penn State with the goals that lie ahead. Let's briefly talk about that playoff outlook. So Penn State is back in the top 4. Georgia took a huge slide, 9 spots in the latest AP Top 25, and Miami as well, falling outside of the top 10. Penn State is back in the top 4, but Oregon being number 1 and Ohio State being number 2, that complicates things a little bit for where Penn State would project. So the top 4 teams that win the conference championship take those top 4 spots. The conference champions take those top 4 spots. If Oregon were to win the Big Ten championship, which it most likely seems to be the case, then Ohio State would get the 5th seed, most likely, if they don't lose any games. We're assuming that everybody wins the games they're supposed to win. Oregon wins the Big Ten championship over an Ohio State team. Penn State wins all of its games, but that would mean that Oregon is number 1, and Ohio State doesn't get a top 4 spot because they're not a conference champion. Same thing with Penn State. They're not a conference champion either here. And Ohio State would probably take that 5th seed, and then Penn State would take the 6th seed. So at the end of the day, Penn State goes 11-1, which they can and will do. They are better than Purdue. They are better than Minnesota. They are better than Maryland. They will go 11-1. And then depending on how the rest of the college football landscape shakes up, Penn State even still has a chance at getting to the Big Ten championship. Now, they would need some help. Oregon's most likely there. I don't see any scenario where Oregon loses either of its final games. But Ohio State still has the game. They're going to play Indiana. I expect Indiana to lose to Ohio State. But what if Ohio State loses to Michigan? Penn State's 11-1. They would have the tiebreakers over in Indiana, which is crazy enough, and then would get into the Big Ten championship and then let them play Oregon and decide it from there. They'd be the underdog, but let the chips fall where they may. The game is played on the turf, not on paper. My point being is that Penn State is going to have a home playoff game at the very minimum here. They're going to be either the 5 or the 6 seed based on what is most likely to happen across the college football landscape. But don't count out Penn State potentially getting a bye game, if getting a bye week and getting into the quarterfinals if some things break in their favor that are out of their control. They get into the Big Ten championship. They win the Big Ten championship game. Then they're one of the top 4 seeds, and you don't even get a home football. You don't even get a home playoff game at Beaver Stadium. Oddly enough, right? That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. I really appreciate your thoughts down in the comments section. Let me know your takeaways from Penn State versus Washington. Please leave a like on this episode, share it with friends and family, and if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And again, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, you got to check out Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. He puts the Big Ten first when other people might overlook it. And how could you when there are 4 Big Ten teams in the top 5 spots with the latest AP Top 25 poll? Craig Sheeman does an incredible job over at Locked On Big Ten. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.